The night almost swallowed her whole the first time she fainted on the bus, her head resting against a cold window while the city lights blurred into streaks of gold and white. No one noticed at first. No one ever did. She was just another exhausted girl in a worn jacket, clutching a canvas bag that carried everything she owned and everything she hoped to become. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, sleep weighed on her eyes, and still she refused to give up. Because somewhere deep inside her, she believed that surviving was not the same as living. And she was fighting, every single day, for the chance to truly live. Before the story pulls you deeper into her struggle and the unexpected turn her life takes, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who believes in kindness and second chances, and subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment if you believe that one act of compassion can change a life forever. Her name was Grace Miller, and she was 22 years old, living in a small, unforgiving corner of Chicago, where the walls of her rented room were thin and the dreams inside her heart were thinner still. Grace worked 3 jobs, not because she wanted ambition or praise, but because survival demanded it. In the early mornings before sunrise, she cleaned offices downtown, wiping fingerprints from glass doors while the city slept. In the afternoons, she served coffee at a crowded cafe, smiling until her cheeks hurt and her legs trembled from standing too long. At night, when most people were heading home, she stocked shelves at a grocery store, counting minutes instead of hours, telling herself that every shift was one step closer to something better. Her days blended together in a blur of alarms, bus rides, and aching muscles. She rarely ate full meals, saving what little money she had for rent and her younger brother's school supplies back in Ohio. Their parents were gone, taken too early by an accident that left Grace suddenly responsible for a life she barely knew how to manage. She carried guilt like a second spine, guilt for leaving her brother with an aunt, guilt for not being there enough, guilt for being tired when the world expected strength. Yet Grace never complained. She moved through life quietly, with eyes that had seen too much and a heart that still hoped for kindness. The cafe regulars barely knew her name, just her face, always polite and distant. The grocery store manager saw her as reliable, nothing more. To most people, she was invisible, and invisibility became her shield. It hurt less when no one expected anything from her. What Grace didn't know was that someone had been watching her struggle from a distance, not out of judgment, but recognition. His name was Daniel Brooks, a single father in his late 30s, raising a 6-year-old daughter named Lily after losing his wife to illness years earlier. Daniel's life was built on routine and responsibility, much like Grace's, though his pain was quieter now, buried under school lunches and bedtime stories. He shopped at the same grocery store every week after work, often late, often tired, often lost in his thoughts. The first time Daniel noticed Grace, it was because of the way she moved. There was a familiar urgency in her steps, a careful efficiency shaped by years of needing to do more with less time. She reminded him of someone he once knew, someone from a life before marriage and parenthood, back when hope felt fragile and precious. At first, he dismissed the feeling as imagination. The past had a way of sneaking into quiet moments. But week after week, he saw her again. Always working, always alone, always with dark circles under her eyes that spoke of exhaustion no one should endure so young. One evening, as he waited in line, he noticed her hands shaking slightly as she arranged items on a shelf. Something in his chest tightened. Recognition finally settled in, heavy and undeniable. Grace was the same girl he had known 15 years ago, the shy teenager who used to sit 2 rows behind him in church, the one who had lost her parents young, the one everyone said was strong but never asked how she was surviving. Daniel remembered her then as a quiet presence, always volunteering, always helping others while carrying her own grief in silence. After graduation, life had pulled them in different directions. He went to college, met his wife, built a family. Grace disappeared from his world, and he assumed she had found her own path. Seeing her now, worn down by life, working through the night, felt like a personal failure of the universe. Grace, meanwhile, noticed Daniel only as another customer, polite and distant. She did not recognize him at first. Years of exhaustion had dulled her memory, and she had learned not to look too closely at people who might disappear just as quickly. Her focus remained on finishing shifts, catching buses, and counting tips to see if she could afford groceries that week. Life pressed harder on her as winter arrived. Heating bills climbed, shifts overlapped, and her body began to protest. One night after finishing her grocery store shift, she collapsed in the break room, her vision narrowing, her strength gone. She woke to fluorescent lights and concerned faces, embarrassed by her weakness, apologizing even as her body betrayed her. She returned to work the next day, afraid that rest would cost her everything. Daniel heard about her collapse from a store supervisor and felt something snap inside him. He could no longer pretend she was just a familiar face. The past had collided with the present, and he realized that sometimes second chances arrive disguised as responsibility. He began to watch more closely, noticing how she skipped breaks, how she avoided conversation, how she carried a loneliness heavier than her workload. One evening after a long shift of his own, Daniel finally spoke to her, not with pity, but with familiarity and care. Grace recognized him then, the memory clicking into place like a forgotten photograph. The realization unsettled her. The past felt like a wound she had learned to live with, not revisit. She worried he would see her as a failure, someone who never escaped the gravity of loss. But Daniel saw something else. He saw resilience carved into her bones, a quiet courage that had not faded despite everything life had taken. Over the next weeks, he found small ways to help without making her feel small. Extra groceries left behind, information about better paying shifts, a reminder to rest. Grace resisted at first, pride rising where desperation lived. Accepting help felt like admitting defeat. Yet slowly, cautiously, things began to change. Daniel connected her with a friend who managed an office cleaning company that paid more and offered stable hours. Grace reduced one job, then another. Sleep returned in fragments at first, then fully. Her face softened as the constant strain eased, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a future that did not revolve around survival alone. Daniel's daughter Lily grew fond of Grace, drawn to her gentleness and understanding. Watching Grace interact with Lily healed something in Daniel too, reminding him that family can be built not just by blood, but by shared care. Grace, in turn, felt a warmth she had forgotten existed, a sense of belonging that filled the emptiness left by years of isolation. Still, healing was not instant. Grace battled guilt for accepting help when others struggled too. She feared the kindness would disappear if she leaned on it too hard. Old habits of overwork and self-denial died slowly. But Daniel remained steady, never rushing her, never asking for anything in return. He understood that some wounds close only when patience replaces pressure. As spring arrived, Grace enrolled in night classes, something she had dreamed of but never dared pursue. Each step forward felt unreal, as though she might wake up and find herself back on the bus, faint and forgotten. Yet the progress remained, tangible and earned. She sent more money home to her brother, visited him when she could, and for the first time, spoke of hope without fear. If this story is touching something inside you, if you've ever struggled quietly or seen someone else do so, please take a moment now to like this video, share it with others, and let us know that stories like this matter. Your engagement helps keep these messages of hope alive. Grace eventually moved into a small but bright apartment, sunlight spilling across floors that felt like promise instead of burden. She no longer worked 3 jobs. She worked one, studied hard, and volunteered at the same church where she and Daniel once sat years ago, now understanding the full circle of her journey. Pain had not disappeared from her life, but it no longer defined her. Daniel watched her transformation with gratitude, not pride. He knew he had not saved her. She had saved herself by surviving long enough to be seen. All he had done was recognize her when the world looked away. Just before this story ends, we ask you one special thing. Please comment below with a single word that represents what this story made you feel. Hope, faith, kindness, or strength. Your words might inspire someone else who is struggling in silence. In the end, Grace stood stronger, not because life became easy, but because someone remembered who she was when she had forgotten herself. And sometimes that is all it takes for a broken path to lead somewhere beautiful.